Welcome to the speaker series on A Shotglass of Recovery.
Yeah. You get a house, you get a car, then you start thinking that's all you are, but you don't know the truth. So let me spell it out for you. Now I got your attention, now there's a start. Now sit and listen to my favorite part. Life's been giving us some clues. The answer lies inside of you.
I am Lisa, the host of A Shotglass of Recovery, and this is our speaker series. Let's sit back and get ready for some more experience, strength, and hope.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak. My name is Jane, and I'm an alcoholic. And I do consider it an honor and a privilege to speak at an AA meeting, despite how early it is. And I'm sure you get that a lot. I am not a morning person. I've only made a 7 a.m. meeting once other than this one, in my entire sobriety. My sobriety date is December 30th, 1991. And that 7 a.m. meeting, I was so proud that I made it. And then I remembered that I was in Seattle and I'm from Philadelphia, so it was 10 a.m. to me. So my pride was short-lived. So anyway, this is actually 7 a.m. And to make it even more interesting, I spent the past week in Los Angeles. So I'm on West Coast time right now and doing my best to get back on East Coast time. So this is helping me not only get another 24 hours, but helping me get back on West Coast time because East Coast time, because I'm not good at getting up in the morning, especially since I retired in February of 2024 after 30 years at the same company. And that is a gift of sobriety. I had a great career and I worked with amazing people. I had great bosses, and that is only a gift of this program. It's not a guarantee of this program, but it's definitely a gift of this program. So I started drinking relatively late. I was 18 when I really started drinking. It was my first year of college. I was a goody two-shoes in high school. I had a small group of friends. I was not, I wasn't one of the popular kids. I wasn't a jock. I wasn't even really, I got good grades, but I wasn't really a geek. I didn't really fit in anywhere. I had like I said, a small group of girlfriends. And we went to the mall, we went to movies. We were fairly boring. I ran into a guy that I knew in high school in the program, my first couple of years sober, and he said, "Gosh, it's really good to see you, but I'm surprised to see you here. You weren't really into anything." And yeah, he wasn't trying to be rude, but I laughed. I'm like, "Yeah, I was just sort of there. I don't want to say nervous. I wasn't neurotic, but I just felt like such a phony. I felt like everyone else seemed to know what they were doing. They seemed to know what room to go to, what form to fill out, who they had to talk to. They seemed to instinctively know how to open their locker, how to pick a seat on the bus. Everyone else just seemed to be able to move through life, and everything for me was a struggle. Every decision, every time I turned around, I just felt like I didn't know what to do, and it was obvious to everyone that I was faking it and that I was a fraud and that I didn't belong. And so I just sort of stepped back. I just didn't put myself out there because I didn't want to be called out as the fake that I felt that I was. So I got good grades in high school and started college. And I believe, well, academically, I was ready for college. I was emotionally not at all ready to be on my own, away from my family. I wasn't far away. I was only an hour away. But my college was pretty much an alcoholic's Disneyland. Once you get in, the alcohol was everywhere. It was free, and it didn't cost you anything, or you didn't get carded as long as you were on campus. I went to my first night on campus. I went to a fraternity party, and I had never I knew I didn't like beer, and the only way I knew that was because in high school, as a senior, I did wind up going to a couple parties, some of those parties that I can't even believe these that we were allowed to do these things when I look back on it, but the parents the parents of these kids would go down the shore, and the kids, the high school kids, were left to home for the weekend, and they'd get a keg somehow and put it in the laundry room sink, and we'd all come over, and people would just drink and be stupid until the police broke it up. And so I knew that I didn't like beer. Of course, it was, cheap swill, but I would nurse it. So I had something in my hand. I would sip it. I'd be like, "Ugh, this is awful." But I obviously learned to drink that stuff when I was in college because it was free and easily available. As long as you were a student at the school, you could walk downstairs into any bar room in any fraternity and tap yourself a beer at any time. And it didn't even matter if you were male or female. As long as you were a student at the school, you could do that anywhere. And they had pub nights on Wednesdays and Thursday nights, which they would have it would just be beer in the certain fraternities. It was all a schedule. It was all very organized. And certain houses were on for pub night Wednesday and Thursday, and then there were always huge parties Friday and Saturday nights. And Sunday night, everyone went to a pizza place that didn't card for beer. And if there were football games, there was tailgating. I mean, it was just everywhere. It was everywhere. And so the first night of school, though, there was a big party. It wasn't just beer. These big parties, they would have a mixed drink of some sort in a trash can with a hefty bag liner. It was very classy. Given how much tuition our parents were paying, we were drinking out of trash bags. And so at that first party, I went up to the trash bag drink and I was told, I knew it was Kool-Aid laced with grain alcohol. I'd never had grain alcohol. I did know that it was stronger. And I do know that I had 4 cups, like solo cups. We called them pub night cups in succession. I had 4 of them. And that that night was the first time that I truly felt the effects of alcohol, that I truly understood what alcohol could do for me. And I was just that night, I don't remember most of it. I remember I had what I guess we would these days we would call brownouts. I would remember I would one minute I was at the bar talking to people, laughing with them, having a great time. I was such a conversationalist and now I was a comedian. And at least that's what I remember. What actually was the truth, who knows? I could dance. I was, so I thought, but I do remember dancing. It's like one minute I'm at the bar, then I'm dancing, then I'm talking, then I'm outside, but I don't have any connection. These memories have no connection. But I just remember that I had like one of the best nights of my life in my mind. I don't remember getting home to my dorm room. I'm amazed that I found it. I'd only been there for like 24 hours. And I woke up completely dressed. I obviously hadn't washed my face, brushed my teeth, or anything. And I was alone, thank God. And I was so, so sick. I was so nauseous. And I thought to myself, oh, this is a hangover, I guess. This is what they mean when they say they're hungover. This really is awful. But I did manage to get cleaned up and over to the main lecture hall from my first college class. It was English with Professor Woolley, and he was the typical New England tweed, a bobbed haircut, the wire rim glasses. He kept us the entire class. It was an hour and a half, and I was nauseous the entire time. I was miserable. When the bell rang, I ran out of the room, ran into the public restroom, like next to the classroom or 2 doors down or whatever, crashed into the first stall, and threw everything up. I have no idea if there were other people in the bathroom. I just vomited everything. And I remember, I kid you not, on my knees, in my face in the toilet, thinking to myself, "This is fantastic. This is what I had been looking for my whole life." Alcohol was the answer. I knew that I had overdone it the night before, but I just had to figure out, I was new to this. I hadn't done this before, and I just had to learn how to drink right. And the way that it felt for me was that when I was drinking and when I felt the effects of alcohol, all these missing pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that was me, all these missing pieces just instantly and effortlessly snapped into place. That's how it felt. That's what drinking did for me. Once. It did it once, and I chased that. I chased that for the rest of my drinking career, and I was an instant alcoholic. As I crossed the line that night and never looked back, never went back, drank to excess. Every time I drank, I blacked out almost every time I drank. It's amazing to me that I wasn't, permanently injured or harmed. I got myself in some incredibly sticky, nasty situations, but no permanent damage. And I think part of my, I don't want to call it luck, but part of the reason that I did okay there was because I was on this campus that was so conducive to drinking. I didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't have to drive, didn't have to go off campus. So, and it was a small campus, only about 100 acres. And I just there was only one road that went through it as far as cars. So, and you couldn't go very fast on it because it wound through the campus. And so I was very lucky in that situation, that I was in that kind of a situation. I know people say that, their higher power carried them, and maybe mine did, but I was so closed off from all of that. I didn't really have I didn't have any belief, positive or negative, in God or a higher power. I wasn't angry at God because I really didn't think God existed. So how could I be angry with something I didn't think existed? I took credit for everything. Everything good and bad that happened to me. I didn't I was alone, and I was adrift, and now I was drinking. And this is where I start to really, it didn't take long that my drinking started to really, right away. My grades started to drop. I was in danger of failing out in my sophomore year, and my response to that was to change my major. And this is important because I had my entire life known what I wanted to do when I grew up. As a little kid, I knew from the very beginning what I wanted to do. Everything I did growing up, all the books that I read, all the little volunteer things that I did, all the projects, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like the essays, all my classes were geared toward this occupation. And I had, it only took like a year of drinking before I decided to toss all of that aside so that I could drink. And my friend Brian says it best, and I hope I don't mess this up. He says normal people adjust their behavior to match their goals, and alcoholics adjust their goals to match their behavior. And that was me, like perfect illustration of that saying. And it didn't even cross my mind. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You wanted to do this forever. But I couldn't do those classes. I couldn't do the labs. I couldn't handle the coursework. I just wanted to drink and party, so I chose a much simpler major, and I almost failed out of that too. But I spent one weekend in the library, like the entire weekend. I had a little bit of discipline left and just studied this one class for the final. I got a C on the final and passed the class and managed to graduate. And I had always been on the honor roll in high school, always. And this was new to me. And I was hiding my grades from my parents. That was not like me. So, and this is after drinking for only 2 years, less than 2 years, maybe a year and a half. Anyway, so I did manage to graduate and couldn't get a job. All my friends could get jobs, and for some reason, I didn't seem to pique any employer's interest. So I moved back home in with my parents, and I eventually did get a job selling frozen food. I mean, if you could freeze it, we probably sold it. And what I did at that time was I took my this would have been this would have been like 1983, 84. Yeah, 84, early 85, 84, 85. So I graduated in 83. No, I'm sorry. I graduated high school in 83. So this was 87. I'm sorry. College was 87. So 88, 89. So there's no internet. There's no cell phones. There's none of that stuff. And I, so what I would do is I would get my appointments. I would call in to an answering service, and it was just a recording. I didn't talk to anyone. I just picked up my appointments for the next day off of this recording. I'd write it down as the woman who had recorded it was speaking. Then I would do these appointments. They were from 11 a.m. at the earliest to 7 p.m. at the latest. It was perfect for an alcoholic. And when I got back, they weren't always that full day. When I got back in the evening, I would present my report to that same recording system. So I was the one leaving the recordings. I never saw anybody. I never went into an office. I wore the same clothes the entire week, thinking I was really getting over on everyone, saving on my dry cleaning. But as I was out doing my appointments, and this was a full commission job, so wasn't making very much money. I was making some, but not enough to live on my own and move out. But I would pick up a fifth of whiskey during my rounds, during my appointments, and I would hear it in the paper bag under my front seat rolling around while I'm driving. And it was like that white noise, calming meditation type stuff. I could hear it, just like I just have to get home and then I can drink as much as I want. And that's what I did. I would get home from these appointments and I would drink about at least half of a fifth a night by myself. And I would watch old Columbo reruns. And I loved, and the Columbo was part of the murder mystery, McLeod, McMillan, and wife, and they were shown late at night, like 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. And I would always stay up and watch Columbo. And it got to the point where I was blacking out before Columbo solved the case. So I would videotape the shows as I was watching them so I could watch it later. And again, none of this ever occurred to me as something that normal people do. You don't videotape a show that you're watching because you know you're going to black out the ending. And at this point, after I got sober, I asked my parents, didn't I ever fall down the stairs? Because they had an old farmhouse, and my room was the attic. And if anyone's familiar with those old farmhouses, those are very steep stairs up to the attic. I'm like, didn't I ever fall down the stairs or leave the dog out or, anything? And like, no, like we knew that you were hostile and miserable to live with and you were drinking all our alcohol. I'm like, "Oh, you noticed. I didn't realize. I thought I was getting away with drinking all their alcohol, filling all their vodka and gin bottles with water, and, I was the point where I my dad liked port wine, and I would put that port wine in Diet Coke because I thought that they couldn't tell that I was drinking Diet Coke with alcohol in it. Really sneaky and clever, this was those big the Gallo, those big jugs of port, and I'm just downing it, and because my parents well, my mother passed away, but and my dad's still alive, but they were not alcoholics. They're not alcoholic. My sister's not an alcoholic. She has 2 wine coolers, and she starts singing. Well, I don't even know if they make wine coolers anymore, the Bartles and James, but it's I have an aunt. My aunt passed away, but she really liked her martinis, but she seemed to do just fine. She was a professor at the University of Illinois, microbiology, and she and her husband moved to California where they retired. She seemed fine, and my dad's grandmother was supposedly a heavy drinker, but never to the point where they wouldn't let her watch my dad and his brother. So I learned a long time ago not to worry about it. It doesn't matter. I am a little concerned about my cousins. My cousin's son got himself thrown out of Arizona State, and that's impressive. That is a party school, a huge party school, and he managed to get himself thrown out. He didn't go to classes at all, like at all. He did manage to join a fraternity, but he got 0 credits his first year. And my cousin's like, "I paid the tuition." He got 0 credits. I'm like, "That sounds like an alcoholic." But of course I didn't say anything, like, who am I to judge? But that the younger generation though, not the older. So that would be my dad's side of the family. My aunt was on my mother's sister. Anyway, sorry for that little trip down memory lane. I'm coming back now. Anyway, where was I? So I'm at my parents' house, this horrible job, and my parents said I was just so awful to them, nasty, miserable, judgmental. So they had to get me out of the house. They were willing to pay to get me out of the house, but they figured that I needed a better job. So the only way to get a better job would be to get a graduate degree. So they offered to help me financially if I wanted to go back to grad school. And I thought, "Oh, that's a good idea. That's what I need. That's exactly what I need." So I did have money saved. So I helped my dad took out loans, which I eventually paid back. And my second year of grad school, I was a teaching assistant, so my tuition was waived. That's how I pulled it off. And also, I went where I went was in Illinois, and I live in Philadelphia, so it was a very nice geographical cure, and that first year, I was doing great. I was getting good grades, I got straight A's, I made a lot of friends that year. I'm like, "Oh, thank goodness." I honestly thought to myself, "Thank goodness I don't have a problem. I'm okay." I still had a reputation as a huge drinker, and I'm thinking to myself, "This is nothing. This is me. I'm not drinking now like I used to." So, I was relieved everything was hunky dory for the first year. And then over the summer, I stayed at the summer to take 2 classes over the summer, and I noticed that my drinking was climbing back to the same level it was at when I was drinking at home. It was I could see it. It was progressive. It wasn't like a light switch. It was very slow, but I was working my ways back up, and I could see it. And I think it might have helped that I didn't have alcoholic parents because I knew that I was different. I knew that they didn't drink like this. That this was unusual. Of course, I always blamed it as my parents just being weird, they're the ones that are different, not me. And anyway, so I did start drinking the same levels of whiskey that I drank when I was at home, and I had brought my homemade Columbo videotapes with me to school, so I was just watching them again. I was blacking out, and my second year, it was starting to show. My grades were slipping, and my friends were noticing. All these great friends that I had made, they were noticing that I was drinking to excess. My poor roommate had a very low bottom alcoholic for a mother, and that woman never did get the answer. She died drunk, she died of cirrhosis. And here I am with my poor roommate, going down the same path. But of course, I don't know. I don't know any of this. But at any rate, I I did manage to graduate because it was only 2 years. It was only 2 years long. If it had been 3 years, I'm not sure because I was really my progression was just phenomenal. I didn't have any social drinking period ever. And that was when I first came in, I used to get a real resentment about that. It's crazy. I'd look at these old timers or older people who drank until they were in their 40s or 50s and think they had so much longer to enjoy this than I did. And I realize now how crazy that is, but I didn't realize it back then. I thought if you got away with it that long, then it must have been, a lot more pleasant than what I went through because it was so short. It just, I drank for, 8, 9 years and it it almost killed me. And it just made no sense to me. If I was only knowing of my aunt and my grandmother, well, they managed to drink for a long time. I was just there's all that crazy stinking thinking that, at least I had as a newcomer. Now I'm incredibly grateful, obviously, incredibly grateful. Anyway, so I came back after grad school, no job, still not able to get a job, back in my parents' house, back, everything's the same. Everything's the same. I'm back in my old bedroom, same car, except I don't have a job. I have no friends. Like, no one that was my friends is in high school is still in the area. Nothing had changed, except I now had a piece of paper or my degree, but nothing had changed. And I was so frustrated at this point. I was so frustrated because I kept thinking, what the heck? Everyone else I know has a real job, has gotten married. A lot of them have kids at this point, or are on their way toward it. And I'm still at my parents' house without a job. No one would come anywhere near me with a 10-foot pole as far as, a boyfriend or anything, except for a one night stand. But they just crazy. I was so frustrated. I'm like, what? My life sucked. And I knew that I drank too much, but I could never make the connection between those two conditions. I could not see how they were connected. All I really wanted was a real job so that I could get out of my parents' house and be on my own and be productive. And I really didn't think I was asking for a whole lot there because I felt that I was very responsible and I would be a good employee. So I thought, took me a while, but I did manage to get a job with a guy that I went to high school with. I remembered him from middle school, but we did go to high school together, and he liked to get high on pot in the afternoons, and I was not interested in that at all. I had my one true love, and that was alcohol, and I was very, very faithful. So, but it's just to say, it was a challenging job. He designed accessories for what was then called the active sports market, which is now called like the extreme sports, skateboarding, snowboarding, and it was just starting to become a thing back then. And he designed, the bracelets, keychains, things like that, that accessories, not very inexpensive accessories that that market segment liked. And he was very successful, but not hugely successful. I mean, the job didn't pay well, but it was very challenging. I still had to live with my parents, but it did get me out of the house during the day. He took us to he really, it was just him and me for a while. And then we had, like, a person who shipped stuff. We had a person who did the books, the financials, and he had contractors that he paid to assemble everything, but they weren't his employees. They were a contracted company. Anyway, he and I would go to these trade shows, and I did not like going to these shows because it was just these he was very extroverted. He loved these things. He fed off of the energy in these big convention halls with booths and all these people with their skateboards, and I just did not like that scene at all. I suffered through it. But one show we went to in San Diego, I was very nervous about because at this point, I was trying to control my drinking because of my health. My health was just horrible, out of control, very bad, and I needed surgery. And it was important that the surgery happen, and I was really worried about, like, I was in my 20s and I couldn't go up a flight of stairs, and I was bloated, and it was not good. So I was trying to not drink, trying to eat better and exercise. So we were going to this show in San Diego, and we were bringing in a guy from Hawaii who was our age, and I was very nervous because I had managed to white knuckle it for 30 days. And so the guy from Hawaii, to me, he was another 2 party animals. Here I am in San Diego, all expenses paid. How am I not and I'm on the plane, and I'm thinking, "Okay, I'll just drink this weekend, and then when I get home, I'll stop drinking again." I'm like, "No, no, 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 can't do that, no." That seesaw back and forth fight that, we're also all very familiar with, I'm sure. But once I got to the show, on Saturday morning, I'm in the booth, and Mike and our Hawaiian sales rep is really miserable. It's not like him. And he's a very upbeat, happy guy. And I went over to ask him, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And he said, "Well, just this week he had been kicked out of his apartment. He'd lost his full-time job, dropped out of school, and his girlfriend had left him." And I said, "Gosh, what happened?" And he said, "I'm an alcoholic, and I've been sober for a year and a half, and I just drank, this week, and I'm, just really upset about it." And as soon as he said that, I heard one word in my head, and the word was now. And I knew it meant say something now. And my mouth opened and the words came out, "Mike, I think I'm one too." And to this day, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. And that's when everything changed in my life. That was the complete 180 pivot point that changed my life. Mike took me to my first 3 meetings in San Diego. He had asked me, why haven't you tried AA?" And I said, "Well, I don't think I've hit my bottom yet." And he said, "Your bottom is when you stop digging." And that made sense to me. What he said made sense to me, even though I'd had no exposure to AA or anything. And he took me to those first 3 meetings, and it was the second one where I was asked to get up and share because I had been noticed by the chairperson, because at that point you had to stand up and introduce yourself if you were from out of town. So the chairperson asked me to share, and I got up and I walked over to the microphone and podium, but it wasn't a big meeting. It sounds like it, but it really wasn't. And explained how I got there that night. I explained Mike and I meeting up and all that. And at this point, I looked around the room as I was sharing, and I could see and I could see the faces, and even to this day, especially this one woman if she hasn't changed in the last 33 years, I'd still remember her. I could see the understanding and the love and empathy, and it hit me right there that this is what I need. This is the answer. This is the truth, compared to that time in the bathroom at college when I'm vomiting, I'm kneeling on the floor in the toilet, and I thought alcohol was the answer. That this program, I didn't know the words at that time, but this program and sobriety recovery was the answer. And I do believe today that when I looked out in those faces in the room in San Diego, that's when I saw my higher power for the first time. And I didn't know that then, but I look back on it now, and that's such a gift. And I also don't believe that I'm that unique in having that kind of experience. I've known a lot of people that have had amazing, what I would consider spiritual experiences, and and don't don't manage to stick with the program. And so to me, it's I really believe that we all get what we need as far as a spiritual experience. It's whether we notice. I don't know if that's the right word, or react or respond. I'm just so grateful that I was open. I don't know how. I didn't deserve it. I did not deserve it, and I wasn't trying. I didn't know. I just grabbed onto it because it seemed like the answer. And why some people don't, even when it's right in front of them, like what happened for me, that's the mystery to me. And it's, again, just like my family origins, I'm not going to try to understand it, but that's where that's where I think the mystery is. But anyway, it's not it's neither here nor there. I threw myself into AA when I came back. I did everything that I was suggested. 90 meetings in 90 days. I got a sponsor. I did service. And, and so a couple things, because I know I'm coming up on time. Mike, the Hawaiian sales guy, he is still sober. He is still sober, and his girlfriend and he got back together. They got married. 2 daughters. One's like a senior in college and one is out of college. Still lives in Hawaii on Kauai. Lucky bastard. Beautiful house. And for me, oh my gosh, sobriety has given me more than I would ever have gotten. Even if I wasn't a drunk on my own, being in now there's no guarantee. There are no guarantees of any of these things. Just being sober doesn't necessarily mean that life's gonna be wonderful, but it really has been beyond my wildest dreams. I've stayed active in the program. I'm sponsoring, being sponsored. I still do meetings. And I went to the international convention in Vancouver this past summer. It was my first one. All this time sober, that was my first one, and I go to the one that's the farthest away from my house. Like, what the heck? But it was amazing. It was unbelievably amazing. And there were times in sobriety I thought, "My God, I have the world by the tail. How what what if something happens? Oh my gosh, what if something happens? What am I gonna do?" Well, something did happen, and I stayed sober. I stayed sober through it. 6 years ago, my husband passed away unexpectedly, and he was sober in this program. 27 years sober. He had a heart attack while taking a nap and just died in his sleep. And I found him in our bed. And it's a great way to go. We all have to go, but it's really, really hard on the people left behind. And my mother passed away recently from dementia, and that was agony. Horrible. Watching, like, not my mother anymore. Horrible. And, but it's coming. at least for me, the shock of being unprepared was and not expecting it. He was fine. He was fine, and obviously not, but he's like, "I'm gonna go take a nap. I'm really tired," and he never woke up. And I was I was just beside I was insane. For 2, almost 3 years, I was insane, but I didn't drink. There were so many times I did not wanna hear the slogans that I agreed with, that "This too shall pass." I didn't wanna hear that. I didn't wanna hear that your higher power only gives you what you can handle. I didn't wanna hear that. I didn't wanna hear that did not wanna hear that everything happens for a reason. I did not wanna hear that. I could not. I did not wanna hear one day at a time. I could not handle any of that. But what I could handle was do not drink. Do not drink. Just do. That was like me going from second to second those first couple of years. Do not drink. And I didn't. And there were times I'm like, now I get it. I get because people don't want to feel this way, even though it's not a solution. You want the relief. You want the relief from the agony of these feelings, even if it's not, but it's a trap. It's a total trap. And thank God I had enough. I don't want to say enough time, but enough of a foundation in this program, because I think you can do it no matter how much time you have, as long as you have a foundation in this program. And you have your support group, you have the fellowship, and you have your recovery. I think. I could be full of shit, but I think for me, having that base and having the foundation, meetings, a sponsor, and I also knew to face it head on. I think that AA really helped me, like, just AA didn't help me recover from grief because that's not AA's job. AA's job is not to help me get past my grief. AA's job is to keep me, sober one day at a time. But working the program just my brain was just laid out to just face everything and recover. I went to grief groups. I just went through it. I accepted it, went through it, and my time's up. So I'll wrap up. So that so the program is just it's a gift in so many ways. It's not just not drinking. It's living. It's really and truly living and happy, joyous, and free beyond my wildest dreams. All those cliches, all those slogans all came true for me. Even with this trauma, sobriety, I wouldn't change anything. And so again, thank you very, very much for having me speak for you. Again, I consider it an honor and a privilege to speak at an AA meeting. And I just hope that someone else will get another 24 hours out of it, because I know I did. So thank you very much.
I'm your host, Lisa M. Thanks for joining me again. Just a quick reminder to subscribe, like, or follow if you like the show on any of your favorite listening platforms. If you like the speakers and other content on the podcast, please show us some love by leaving a review and consider making a PayPal contribution to help keep the show going at paypal.me/A Shotglass of Recovery. Every dollar makes a difference, and we thank you. Our speakers come from my AA home group, AA Solution Seekers. We meet every day at 7 a.m., so pop in sometime and say hello. Until next time, thanks for joining me on A Shotglass of Recovery.
Everything you do, the answer lies inside you.